were the couple everyone envied, 10 years strong, the kind of love that made others believe in soulmates. I trusted him with everything, until the night I stumbled upon a secret group chat on his tablet, filled with intimate messages, pictures and jokes I was never meant to see. The worst part? The other woman wasn't a stranger, she was my best friend. The one who toasted our wedding, held my hand through miscarriages, and sat beside me during every heartbreak. This isn't just a story about betrayal, it's about how deep deception can run, how fragile forever really is, and what happens when the ones you love most become the ones who destroy you. Part 1. The Smile She Stole. I used to believe that if love was real, it would be enough. That if two people promised forever really meant it, they'd figure it out. My name is Claire Lawson. I'm 34, a kindergarten teacher, quiet by nature but loud in my love. I met Ethan during my senior year of college. He was tutoring biology in the library, all rolled up sleeves and nervous jokes. We got coffee after study group once, and that was it. We didn't fall in love, we grew into it, slow, steady, deliberate. It was the kind of relationship built on small things: shared playlists, grocery lists, Sunday pancakes, forehead kisses before work. We got married 5 years later in a vineyard upstate, and for the next decade I believed, truly believed, that I'd won the lottery. Ethan was loyal, kind, the kind of man who would rub your back during cramps and remember your favorite pasta shape. We had no kids yet, though we tried. 2 miscarriages, 1 failed IVF, but through it all he stayed. Or so I thought. Then came the night of my 34th birthday. We threw a small dinner party at our house, just a few close friends, laughter, wine, music, and her, Samantha, my best friend since high school, the girl who knew every embarrassing story about me, the one who cried with me during our wedding vows, the one who showed up with flowers after each miscarriage. She was beautiful, tall, confident, a little wild. People always said we balanced each other out, and I believed them. That night, something felt off. Ethan laughed a little too hard at her jokes. She touched his shoulder more than once. When I brought out the cake, I caught them exchanging a glance that made my stomach twist. Too familiar, too warm. But I shook it off. Paranoia, maybe, or insecurity. I wasn't feeling my best lately. Gained some weight, been stressed from school. Maybe I was just imagining it. The next day, Ethan left his tablet open on the kitchen counter. He usually didn't. In fact, he was oddly protective of it. But that morning, he was in a rush, running late to meet a client. I wasn't snooping, at least not at first. I was checking our grocery list when a message popped up in a chat titled S+E lock. I froze. My hands hovered above the screen. Then I tapped. The thread exploded open. Dozens, hundreds, months worth of messages, photos, voice notes, inside jokes I didn't understand. But the intimacy was unmistakable. Some messages were from days I was curled up on the couch sobbing after our 2nd miscarriage. Samantha, she still doesn't know. Ethan, no, she's too busy feeling sorry for herself. It's almost sad. Samantha, you should be here. I miss your mouth. Ethan, tonight, usual spot. My mouth went dry. My heart didn't break, not immediately. It slowed, like my body was trying to shield me from the impact. I scrolled, and the truth stared back like a slap. They had been sleeping together for over a year. During our IVF, during my birthday, during the times she came over to check on me. That night, I didn't cry. I closed the tablet, made dinner, kissed Ethan hello, watched a movie, smiled. But inside, something snapped. I didn't scream, I didn't throw anything, I didn't beg. I started planning. Part 2. The Whispered Lies. I went to bed that night feeling hollow, like my skin had been scraped off, leaving only nerves exposed. The man I trusted, the man I loved, had been living a secret life. And the worst part? It was all wrapped up in the woman I called my best friend. Sleep was impossible. My mind spun in circles, memories flashing back in sharp, unforgiving detail. Samantha's laugh at my birthday party, her hand brushing Ethan's arm, their quiet texts while I lay broken in the bedroom. I remembered how she used to call me late at night, sobbing over her own relationship troubles. I comforted her, wiped her tears, held her hand, all while she was planning to steal my husband behind my back. I hated them both. But beneath the hate was something darker, a raw, gnawing grief I couldn't name. Not just for my marriage, but for the betrayal of my own soul. The next morning, Ethan left early for work, the usual smile on his face, unaware that I knew everything. Samantha was scheduled to meet me for lunch, oblivious to how close I was to destroying everything. I sat at our favorite cafe, staring at the empty chair across from me, wishing I had the strength to scream, to demand answers, to make them feel the pain they'd caused. When Samantha arrived, she smiled like nothing had changed. "Hey, Claire, you look tired. Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just work stress." She chatted about her new job, a promotion she was proud of, but I wasn't listening. I was watching her, the way her eyes darted, the slight hesitation in her voice. At that moment, I realized I had to play my part. If I wanted to hurt them the way they hurt me, I had to be patient, cold, calculating. I spent the next days pretending to be oblivious, laughing at Samantha's jokes, sharing stories with Ethan like nothing was wrong. But behind the scenes, I was unraveling their web of lies. I checked Ethan's phone. The messages had been deleted, but his habits betrayed him. Late nights, working, frequent texts that made him smile. Samantha's car parked outside the office when she claimed to be at home. One night, I followed them. They met at a small, dimly lit bar downtown. Ethan's hand rested on Samantha's knee under the table. They whispered and laughed as if the world didn't exist. I felt my heart break again, not for love lost, but for the trust destroyed. But I didn't run. I didn't yell. I didn't confront them. Instead, I took a picture, discreet, hidden in the shadows, proof of the truth they tried so hard to hide. The next day, I sent the photo anonymously to both their phones. Silence, no calls, no apologies, nothing. That's when I realized this wasn't about love anymore. It was about power, control. I had to make them pay, not with rage, but with the slow, creeping poison of betrayal. But revenge is a dangerous game, and sometimes it's the player who gets burned the worst.
Part 3. Cracks in the Mask. Days passed with a heavy silence hanging over our home. Like a thick fog refusing to lift, Ethan and Samantha didn't confront me. Instead, they pretended I was a ghost, invisible, unheard, unimportant. But I was watching. Every word, every glance, every stolen moment behind closed doors. I began to notice the cracks. Ethan's usual calm facade started to crumble. His smiles grew forced, his eyes darting nervously when I entered the room. Samantha stopped calling me Claire in that friendly, warm way. Instead, her voice chilled when she spoke to me. One evening, I sat alone in the living room, the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. The silence screamed louder than any accusation I could make. I realized that holding it all inside was like drowning slowly in a sea of lies. But I wasn't ready to surrender. That night, I wrote Ethan a letter, not to plead, not to beg, but to remind him of what we once had. I poured every ounce of pain and hope into those words, hoping to reach the man buried beneath the deceit. Ethan, I don't know if you remember the man I married, the one who promised me forever. Somewhere between the lies and the silence, I lost him. I'm still here, waiting for the truth, for the man who once held my heart. If that man still exists, come back to me. I left the letter on the kitchen table and retreated to the bedroom, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. Hours later, Ethan came home, his face pale, his hands trembling. He didn't say a word. He simply picked up the letter, read it slowly, then dropped it like a stone in the empty room. "We need to talk," he finally said, voice barely above a whisper. We sat at the kitchen table, two strangers bound by memories and shattered promises. He confessed everything, The affair with Samantha started as a mistake, a moment of weakness during a difficult time at work. But it quickly spiraled into something deeper, something he couldn't stop. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I was lost, and I didn't know how to ask for help. I wanted to scream, to tell him it was all a lie. But the truth was there, raw and painful. The hardest part wasn't his betrayal. It was the silence, the distance that grew between us with every unspoken word. That night, we didn't make promises. We didn't plan a future. We simply sat in the quiet, two broken souls trying to find their way back. But Samantha wasn't done. The next day, she showed up at my door, eyes blazing with anger and defiance. "Claire, this isn't over," she hissed. "You think you can just take him back? You're wrong." For the first time, I felt something crack inside me, a fierce, burning resolve. I wasn't going to let her win. I was going to fight, for my family, for my dignity, for the life I still believed I deserved. But little did I know, the battle was only beginning. Part 4, The Storm Inside. Samantha's threat echoed in my mind long after she slammed the door shut. I stood there, trembling, clutching the edge of the kitchen counter just to keep myself upright. The woman who used to braid my hair before school, who shared my deepest secrets, had become my enemy, and not just emotionally. She was ready to go to war. Ethan kept his distance that evening. I think he sensed the chaos brewing inside me. The letter I had written had cracked his guilt open, but it hadn't repaired the damage. He sat in the living room, phone in his hands, scrolling through God knows what, while I sat alone at the dining table staring at a half-eaten dinner I couldn't force down. "I'm sorry she came here," he muttered at some point, not even looking up. I didn't respond. I had no words left for apologies that were too late. The days that followed were strange, an eerie limbo between collapse and reconciliation. We went through the motions, woke up, exchanged small talk, acted like a couple again, but the ghost of Samantha haunted every corner. Ethan said he'd ended things with her, but I knew her. She wasn't someone who accepted rejection gracefully. Then the emails started. Anonymous. At first, one-liners, "You're pathetic. You deserve this. Ask him about last Tuesday." I showed Ethan, and he froze. "She's not going to stop," I said coldly. "She's trying to break what's left of us." Ethan rubbed his face, the weariness settling deep in his eyes. "I'll talk to her, one last time." I didn't want him to. The thought of him seeing her again twisted something in my gut, but I didn't stop him either. Maybe part of me wanted to see what choice he'd make when given another chance. He left that night without saying goodbye. I stayed up, curled on the couch in the same hoodie I wore the night I found out. The house felt colder, emptier. Every creak made me flinch. Every car that passed made me hope it was him. Midnight came, then 1, then 2. When he finally walked in at 3 in the morning, I was standing in the hallway, waiting. "She's gone," he said quietly. "I told her it's over. For good." I studied his face. It was tired, but peaceful, and I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. We sat in silence for a long time. No accusations, no forgiveness, just silence. In the morning, we went for a walk, our first in months. It was cloudy, the air thick with that pre-storm stillness. He held my hand like it was the most fragile thing in the world. "Claire," he said suddenly, stopping in the middle of the path, "do you think we can ever get back to who we were?" I stared at him, the man who had shattered me but also the man who, in his own broken way, was trying to pick up the pieces. "I don't think we'll ever be who we were," I said honestly, "but maybe we can become something new, if we're willing to bleed for it." He nodded slowly. "I'm willing." But just as we began to believe in second chances, fate reared its head again, crueler this time. That evening, a knock at the door startled us both. Ethan opened it and froze. Samantha. But not the Samantha I remembered. Her face was gaunt, her eyes wild. "You lied to me," she spat. "You said we had a future." I stepped between them, my voice steadier than I felt. "You need to leave." She ignored me, eyes locked on Ethan. Tell her you said you loved me, that you were going to leave her for me." Ethan didn't deny it. The silence screamed louder than any words. She stormed out, but I knew this wasn't the end. She wasn't done destroying us. And I wasn't sure we could survive what was coming next. Part 5, Shattered Glass and Shattered Vows. I didn't sleep that night. The bedroom, once our sanctuary, felt cold and foreign. Daniel lay beside me, motionless, his breathing steady, like nothing had happened, like he wasn't sharing our home, our bed, and now, his heart with someone else, my own sister. I stared at the ceiling, counting every crack in the plaster, every breath I took just to remind myself I was still here, still alive. But I didn't feel it. I felt hollow, like someone had reached inside and scooped out my insides with a silver spoon. In the early hours of the morning, I walked past Sophie's room. Her door was slightly open. I could hear her humming. She was brushing her hair, sitting in front of the mirror in her silk robe, the same one I gave her for her birthday 2 years ago. She didn't see me, but I watched her, and in that moment, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. She wasn't ashamed. She didn't look guilty or nervous or broken. She looked radiant, like she had won. It took everything in me not to storm in there and scream until my throat bled. But I didn't. I walked away, not because I was weak, but because I needed a plan. I couldn't let them destroy me. Over the next few days, I became an actress in my own life. I smiled. I made dinner. I asked Sophie how her day was. I laughed at Daniel's jokes. But behind my eyes, a storm brewed. I documented everything. The glances, the touches, the whispers when they thought I wasn't looking. I started recording conversations on my phone, backing up files, taking screenshots. If they were going to betray me, I was going to make sure they couldn't gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. One night, Daniel came home late, again. He claimed he was working. His tie was loose, the top button undone. He smelled of Sophie's perfume. I could feel it all over him like a second skin. I kissed his cheek and said, "I'm making your favorite tomorrow." He smiled, oblivious. That night, I drafted an email to his mother, his boss, and my lawyer. I attached everything. And I saved it, just in case. I wasn't ready to burn it all down, not yet, but I needed to know that if the moment came, I could. But then, something happened I wasn't prepared for. I started bleeding. At first, I told myself it was stress, that the baby was fine, but when the pain doubled me over and I collapsed in the kitchen, I knew. At the hospital, the nurse looked at me with soft eyes and said, "I'm so sorry." It was gone. My baby, the one thing I was holding on for, the hope in my storm. Daniel didn't show up. He said he had a meeting. Sophie sent flowers, a cheap bouquet from the corner store with a card that said "Thinking of you." No signature. I went home to silence, to betrayal, to emptiness. And for the first time in weeks, I screamed. Part 6, The Funeral That Never Was. The days after the miscarriage blurred together like a long, gray rain. I stopped pretending. I stopped cooking dinner. I stopped responding to Sophie's empty questions or Daniel's half-hearted "Are you okay?" The truth had lived in my silence too long. It had grown sharp, and now it was cutting me from the inside out. The nursery I'd started decorating became a crime scene in my mind, not of murder, but of abandonment. I sat in that unfinished room for hours, holding the tiny socks I'd bought on impulse one afternoon. Blue, just in case. I had dreamt of his name. I had whispered it in the dark. I never told anyone, but I had called him Eli. Now Eli was gone, and the people who should have grieved with me were the ones who had caused it. Daniel didn't cry. He came home late, again and again, smelling like lavender and lies. I didn't need to ask where he was. The guilt had left his eyes weeks ago. Whatever love once lived between us had suffocated under the weight of secrecy and shame. And Sophie? She floated through the house like nothing had happened. She wore my jewelry, my sweaters. She even started using my shampoo. The line between us was blurring, and it wasn't by accident. She wanted my life. And slowly, she was taking it. One afternoon, I walked past the guest room and stopped dead. Her phone was unlocked. I never did this before, never wanted to be that person. But I had already lost everything. What was left to protect? My hands trembled as I scrolled. There they were, dozens of messages. "Daniel, can't stop thinking about last night. You're everything she's not. Sophie, soon, I promise. She's unraveling. Just give it time. Daniel, you'd make such a better mother anyway." I couldn't breathe. I dropped the phone like it burned me. It didn't feel like betrayal anymore, it felt like theft. They didn't just fall in love. They orchestrated this. My sister had infiltrated my life like a parasite. And Daniel, the man I vowed forever to, helped her dismantle me, piece by piece. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I packed a small suitcase with only the essentials: passport, documents, some cash, and one photo of me in Eli's first ultrasound. Then I walked into the kitchen where they sat, laughing over wine. I said, "I know everything." Silence fell. Sophie's face paled. Daniel blinked like he'd been slapped. I placed the printed screenshots in front of them. Pages. Evidence. Then I said, "I'm leaving. You two deserve each other. And someday, you'll choke on the guilt, if you have a shred of decency left." Sophie opened her mouth, probably to explain, to beg, to blame. I held up my hand. No more lies. And I walked out the door. No goodbye. No second glance. But what I didn't know was that the story wasn't over. Because revenge, like grief, has its own timeline. And mine had just begun. Part 7. What remains after the fire? I thought leaving would be the hardest part. But nothing compares to the silence that follows. I moved into a small apartment across town. No furniture, no color, just blank walls and the sound of my own thoughts echoing too loudly. At first, I didn't unpack. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor at night with the single photo of my ultrasound clutched to my chest like a relic from another life. They had taken everything: my husband, my sister, my child. And yet, I was still here. In the weeks that followed, I tried therapy. I tried yoga. I even tried forgiveness. But nothing worked, not really. Because pain doesn't vanish, it mutates. One night, as rain lashed against the windows and the city blurred in darkness, I opened Daniel's emails. I still had access. I hadn't told him. Curiosity? Vengeance? Maybe both. Among invoices and work reports, I found a reservation, a weekend getaway, for two, to the cabin we once loved. He was taking her there. Our place. I felt something shift in me, a cold, controlled clarity. I booked a room nearby. I drove through the night, headlights cutting through fog, my hands white-knuckling the steering wheel. I wasn't going to confront them, not directly. I didn't want chaos. I wanted truth. I watched them arrive. I saw her laugh the way I used to. I saw him touch her like he touched me. They didn't know I was there. I stayed 3 days, watching from a distance. On the final day, I mailed them a letter. No threats, no rage. Just this. One day, you'll remember me, not as the woman you betrayed, but as the one who survived you both. Eli would have had my eyes. You'll never see them. Then I vanished. But fate had its own cruel twist to offer. A few weeks later, I got the call. Sophie was dead. A car accident, late at night, alone. They said she was texting, distracted. Daniel survived. Minor injuries, but his world, like mine, had finally cracked open. He called me, once. I let it ring. He sent flowers. I threw them away. He begged for forgiveness. I sent him silence. Because some wounds don't want closure. Some wounds are the closure. I never saw him again. A year passed. I moved to a new city. I changed my number. I started working at a small nonprofit that helps women escape abusive relationships. The irony wasn't lost on me. I thought I had a fairy tale, but it turned out I was living a cautionary tale. Sometimes, healing doesn't mean forgetting. Sometimes it means carrying the pain like a scar, a mark of what you've endured, a reminder that you can be shattered and still stand. On Eli's due date, I lit a candle. I whispered his name. And I promised him this. That his mother would rise, that she would build a new life from the ashes, that she would never be broken again. Because betrayal tried to bury me. But I became the soil, and grew.